Good evening and welcome to the COVID-19 update on Channels Television. I'm Millicent Walker. First, the highlights. More trouble for the El-Zakzakis as wife of the Islamic movement of Nigeria tests positive to COVID-19. And more schools prepared to resume across states amidst second wave of coronavirus. And Mexico's president tests positive for COVID-19 amid the country's deadliest coronavirus pandemic, which has pushed health systems of the country's capital to its limits. And for the first time in weeks, Nigeria recorded less than 1,000 cases in a single day, with the Nigeria Center for Disease Control, NCDC, reporting 964 cases in 18 states and the FCT. The last time the country saw a similar number was on the 3rd of January 2021, when 917 cases were recorded and our overall cases were below 100,000. Before that date, on the 2nd of January, the country also recorded another low, that's 576 cases. But as with all cases recorded between now and then, Lagos takes a huge chunk of the numbers, followed by other states like the FCT, Plateau, Kaduna, and others. Well, last night, however, the top 5 states with the cases above 50 include Lagos State there with 360 cases, followed by the Federal Capital Territory recording 88 cases, Ogun State recorded 73, Imo 72, Kaduna 67, Plateau 57. Total confirmed cases stand at 121,566. The recoveries are inching towards 100,000, and the death toll stands at 1,504. According to the center, up to 774 community recoveries were recorded in Lagos State alone. In the meantime, the national case definition for the coronavirus in Nigeria has been updated. According to the Center for Disease Control, a close contact of a confirmed case, irrespective of symptoms, will be identified as a suspect case. The NCDC says it will continue to review case definitions based on emerging scientific evidence. The Kaduna State High Court, sitting in the state capital, has confirmed that the wife of the embattled leader of the Islamic movement in Nigeria, Sheikh Ibrahim El-Zakzaki, has contracted the coronavirus, ordering her immediate evacuation from the correctional center to a treatment center. Mrs. El-Zakzaki reportedly contracted the virus inside the Nigerian Correctional Center in Kaduna State capital last week, but the management of the correctional center had denied that report. At the resumed trial of the defendants, who are facing an 8-count charge of culpable homicide, unlawful assembly, among others, their counsel, Mr. Femi Falana, presented a medical report to back his claim.
We drew the attention of the court to the fact that she has tested positive for this dangerous COVID-19 pandemic, and that she's been treated in the correctional center that has no facility, to treat such a patient. So we applied to the court to direct the prison, the authorities of the correctional center, to allow her to be treated outside the 4 walls of the correctional center. And the court graciously made the order that the authorities should take her to a government hospital that has the facilities for treating such a patient.
Meanwhile, tertiary institutions resumed today in Kaduna State following the government's approval for all post-secondary education institutions to resume on the 25th of January. In a statement issued by the permanent secretary in the state's Ministry of Education, the approval came after an assessment team had gone round all tertiary institutions in the state to ensure their level of preparedness and plans for reopening, that they are in full compliance with the state's COVID-19 preventive protocols. She advised management of all tertiary institutions to continue to ensure the strict adherence to all the guidelines and to avoid overcrowding both in class size and hostel occupancy and the availability of functional health facilities for isolation of suspected cases. We go over to Delta State, where staff and pupils of public schools in Ila community of Shimili North local government area of the state are receiving face masks donated by the government. Presenting the masks, the Chief Press Secretary to the Governor, Mr. Olisei Fejika, says the action has become necessary due to the resurgence of the pandemic and the vulnerability of school children and teachers. He appeals to authorities of schools to take special interest in the care of the children, since the prevailing second wave of COVID-19 has proven to be more vicious.
We just handed over the face masks to the school authorities in the first schools we visited. And my appeal to them, which I'm repeating now, is to please first give the face mask to the children. Second is to ensure that they use it. The children are very vulnerable, very, very vulnerable. And they can be difficult too, especially when the wearing of the face mask can be very inconveniencing, very, very inconveniencing. So they will tend to remove it as soon as they are free, they are alone. It is for the handlers to ensure the usage.
Fumigation of the campus at the University of Calabar by the COVID-19 Task Force Committee, which has commenced ahead of resumption scheduled for the 5th of February 2021. Speaking at the university premises in Calabar, the Vice-Chancellor of the university explains that the fumigation is part of the criteria for the preparation of academic activities in the institution to contain the spread of COVID-19. The VC added that adequate measures have been put in place by the school authority to ensure that all the COVID-19 protocols as directed by the NCDC are observed.
We're having a team that is going to enforce the wearing of face masks. We make sure that staff and students wear their face mask, because that is where we start from. We must all wear our face masks and wear them appropriately and properly at all times. In fact, all the security men will have students, volunteers, will have some other staff who work with the COVID-19 team. This will be the task force, enforcement task force, to make sure that you can't be found on campus without a face mask.
Still in the South, the Abia State Governor, Okezie Ikpeazu, has directed the State Ministry of Health to liaise with the chairman of 17 local government councils of the state and ensure the immediate formation of COVID-19 committees at the local government level. According to the governor, the committees will be saddled with the responsibility of disseminating vital information on the pandemic across the remotest part of the state, including massive public enlightenment on the need to abide by the preventive protocols. The governor also reminds the people of Abia State that the second wave of the pandemic must be treated with every seriousness. Now let's talk some more about some of the concerns about the COVID-19 vaccines. And joining us here in the studio is Mr. Augustine Ajijelek. He's a pharmacist, a member Association of Hospital Administrative Pharmacists of Nigeria. We'd like to thank you for joining us on the program.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Now, the federal government has promised vaccine rollout for the few that they're expecting end of January, which is pretty much the last week in January. But it also seems that a lot of people are opposed to taking the vaccines. There's several myths which we will get to. But then why do you think that people are opposed to taking the vaccine?
Well, generally, it's commendable that the federal government is attaching some urgency to getting these vaccines here, because we need to get started with them. But in terms of vaccine skepticism, it's not new in this country. The history of vaccination against poliomyelitis, measles, and others is riddled with a lot of skepticism from sometimes very educated people. But from our experience, we know that it took us some years, and then we had thousands of cases of poliomyelitis. And at the end of the day, we all had to reason and then support the vaccination. At the end, we were declared polio-free eventually. So this is no different. those objections would be there, those anxieties would be there, because much information is not out there in terms of COVID-19. There's a lot of awareness, but not much knowledge. And that's why even more has to be done to ensure that everybody understands what vaccines are, what they do, and what they don't do.
Okay, so I took time to sort of find out some of the myths, that a lot of people are talking about. And if we look at the very first one is people are saying this vaccine came out too quickly. Can we trust the COVID-19 vaccine because they were rushed?
Yes, that's a legitimate concern, because vaccines generally take close to 10 years to come out. But we have never seen an epidemic outbreak like COVID-19. So it came, it disrupted a lot of things and caused a lot of anxiety in the world. So with this heightened anxiety, countries, individuals, pharmaceutical companies, and all stakeholders around the world came together. And the main challenges with vaccine production is that you have to be sure, first of all, of their safety and then their efficacy. And there are very rigorous scientific processes that are done in terms of getting to determine these two parameters about the vaccines. And then it has to do with a lot of funding. It has to do with recruitment of human subjects in the trial after the animal studies have been done. So these are things that if you have enough resources, just as we saw, like the US government that launched Operation Warp Speed, and the European Union were also pumping in a lot of money. And even the companies, the pharmaceutical companies themselves, actually invested very huge sums. And then there happened to be no shortage of enrollees for the clinical trials at every stage. So within a very short time, many people were willing to come up, especially that the infection was, going at a very high rate. It was infecting a lot of people. So having people to come forward and be part of the trial was not so much of a problem, especially with the finance that actually went in. So people should not be surprised. Of course, the world is moving. Science itself is evolving. And the capabilities we have in science right now are much more than the capabilities we had some 20 years, 30 years back. So people should have faith in this vaccine, because the FDA in the United States, which has approved the vaccines from Moderna and from Pfizer and BioNTech, of course, they don't joke with their standards. You have to actually show proof of safety and also efficacy. Recall that we even have medicines that have been in use before for treatment of other diseases. And when people say they were of benefit in COVID-19, the FDA stood its ground and rejected those things because no scientific evidence could be brought up that was convincing, to show that they were actually efficacious and safe in COVID-19.
What about for those who feel that they actually do not know what's in these vaccines and that perhaps the vaccines might infect them with COVID-19 before it starts to work?
Well, I think they might have heard about some of the technologies that were used in making vaccines in the past, which used live attenuated versions of the infectious agent, viruses in this particular case. But what has been done by both Pfizer, BioNTech, and also by Moderna is they have used mRNA technology to actually make these vaccines. So it is not actually a viral particle or an attenuated version of the vaccine, or even dead viruses that have been used for these vaccines. So this mRNA, once it comes in contact with the body, it actually works at the level of what some cellular structures called ribosomes to produce spike proteins. These are just those proteins when you look at the structure of the coronavirus. It's a very popular image everywhere, even in your background you see. There are certain projections. Those are the spikes, and they are made up of a certain protein. Now, these proteins are what are produced inside the cell, and then we have the helper T cells, or we call them the soldiers of the body, for everybody to understand. Mm-hmm. Those are now activated to recognize that there is a foreign substance in the body, and then the immune system is now activated to fight against that particular foreign substance.
I have a feeling that you're going to have to come again to talk about the very many myths that exist about the coronavirus. But we need to go on a break. We'd like to thank you. We appreciate your time. We've been speaking to Mr. Augustine Ajijelek, pharmacist, member, Association of Hospital Administrative Pharmacists of Nigeria. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Joining
It's
us.
been
And
my
let's
pleasure.
add Mythbuster. Thank you again.
Thank you very much.
According to scientists and health practitioners, the second wave of COVID-19 is presenting increased number of infections across the globe. In this next report, you see the increasing demand for medical attention and oxygen by patients at the Yaba Infectious Diseases Hospital. Our correspondent, Olu Phillips, tells us more.
A typical day in the bustling city of Lagos, the commercial nerve center of Nigeria, as people make their way through the day amidst a terrible pandemic that keeps threatening the economy and well-being of nations, including Nigeria. Findings show that it's still a mixed bag of adherence to protocols aimed at slowing the disease. To underscore the dangers associated with unprotected lifestyle, our crew is visiting one of the most active biosecurity complexes in Nigeria, an infectious disease center in Yaba. Before the tour, we are briefed by the State Commissioner of Health, Dr. Bayami, about this complex.
The place is full of COVID-19. You're either a patient diagnosed with COVID-19 or you're a relative. We are likely to be, the chances that the relatives of the patients are positive are high. The place is full of medical personnel, many of which are infected. Some of them know it, some of them don't know it.
Some people have come in randomly or by reference to conduct a COVID test, which for safety reasons and for exigencies of reducing viral load is done in the open. Statistics from this center shows that the demand for oxygen has risen from 60 large cylinder bottles daily to about 300 owing to high record of cases, to which the government has responded swiftly by installing these embedded oxygen plants to meet the rising demand. This is the ICU unit, and 2 patients are currently on ventilators. We are told the longer, the lower the chances. Prayers for them.
Every second we can see what is happening here.
There are real patients, real Nigerians currently receiving treatment, as we will show you shortly. You can't mess around here, so we have to don the right apparel. Yes, the air in there is filtered, but we are told the virus is active. Here we go. All over this isolation ward are people fighting for their life. Incidentally, they are all on oxygen to aid breathing. To underscore the consequences of the situation, some patients opted to have their identities on camera.
Right from yesterday that I was moved into this facility at Yaba, I know there is COVID and people should protect themselves very well. It is real. And I pray for Nigerians that God Almighty should take COVID away from us.
So, some people think COVID, no COVID.
No, it's there.
Huh?
It's there.
In the last 48 hours, 10 people were wheeled out of this place because they lost the battle. This is a 76-bed male ward isolation center here in Yaba. And the doctors tell me that in the last 2 weeks, it's been very hectic managing the health crisis of many Nigerians who have come in here. 50 mortality has been recorded in the last 2 weeks.
First, you want to overcome the problem of is real is not real. And I think we are overcoming it. More and more people are now aware that COVID-19 is real because more and more people close home are falling for the disease.
From this center, Of over 250 beds, many have recovered. Sadly also, close to 100 have died. But that's not all. There's also a growing trend of post-COVID survival syndrome, which presents problems in the heart, intestines, and so on. Olu Phillips, Channels Television News.
That's the reality in just one isolation or treatment center in Lagos State. But let's take a look at the list of countries that are vaccinating by population as the rollout continues across the world. It shows that Israel is doing the most, and this is followed by the UAE. You have the United States, that's in 5th place after Bahrain in terms of doses per 100 people. It took just over 1 year for the US to go from 1 to 25 million coronavirus infections, and that's an average of about 67,934 new infections every day, or what you might call an average of 1 new infection every 1.2 seconds, and this is since the 21st of January. Well, Dr. David Ajibade is a public health physician, CEO of Brain and Body Foundation. He joins us via Zoom from Tulsa, Oklahoma, in the United States. We'd like to thank you for joining us on the program.
Thanks for having me.
So let's go with what it seems to be that the cases in the US are soaring and also the number of deaths. Why do you think that this is happening?
Well, thanks again, Millicent, for having me. A lot of it is due to two things from what we see. There was a lot of travel. The number was about 170 million traveled between Christmas and New Year, all over the country. And so there's a great chance for super spreading. The other reason, of course, is the winter. This is a time when everybody's cold. Everybody's sitting indoors. Everybody's bunched up. There's a greater chance for spread there. And let me add a third reason. The third reason is that, quite frankly, a lot of people in this country are jaded. They are tired. In fact, Florida State, they just said, no more. We're not going to do any restrictions. All public places are open, go in and eat. Nobody's forcing the mask mandates unless you want to. So there's a lot of laxity in several states. I mean, even in this state, Oklahoma, people can go into Walmart without their mask. So we're beginning to see that people in many states don't care, although in some states there's a real strong forcing of the rules. But it's a challenge to make a uniformity across the board.
Could the coronavirus variant called the B117, do you think that, we understand it's been identified in at least 22 US states?
Yeah, and the news is that it's about 50 to 70% more deadly. 23 states at last count. And so there's a lot of concern about that, and a lot of concern too to get the vaccines out in time, because they're saying, if you don't vaccinate at least 60 to 70% of the population, you will lose that window of time, and then the virus will keep on morphing and mutating. So they want to try and get it in as quickly as possible so that you can achieve what is known as herd immunity. But that is a challenge, and of course, they're talking about the South African variants too that is in the country. So they're fighting this thing on multiple fronts.
Well, back home in Nigeria, just today, the NCDC sort of updated its case definition and said that, it was sort of introducing or reviewing the fact that a close contact of a confirmed case, irrespective of the symptoms, so the person might be asymptomatic, is now a suspected case. Do you think that changes anything, and do you think that it's timely?
Well, first of all, I want to tip my hat out to the DG of the NCDC and, of course, the Ministry of Health and the Nigerian government for what they're doing. Surprisingly, the numbers have still remained low relatively. Yes, if you're concerned about keeping the numbers down, it's going to be a greater challenge to trace close relatives and close associates. But if that's what needs to be done, then that's what needs to be done.
We'd like to thank you so much, Dr. David Ajibade. Thank you for joining us on the program. Stay safe.
Thank you for having me.
Now, Mexico's President Andrés Manuel López Obrador confirmed he had tested positive for COVID-19. The 67-year-old president, who was a heavy smoker until suffering a major heart attack in 2013, said in a tweet that his symptoms were light and he was receiving treatment. As always, I'm optimistic, said Mr. Obrador, who has resisted wearing a face mask in public since the virus reached Mexico over 10 months ago. And this is also as scientists are reporting early laboratory tests suggesting that the Moderna COVID vaccine can work against the more infectious variants of the pandemic found in the United Kingdom and South Africa. Continue to take responsibility. You can also visit our website. It's channelstv.com for more updates, a better understanding of the pandemic, plus you find other stories as well, and politics, business, and sports. It's all at your fingertips. That's the program this evening. Thank you for watching. I'm Millicent Umonka. Stay healthy.